Welcome back to the Divided States of America show. I'm your host, Marlon Gardenera. It's Friday, October 21st. Let the separation begin. MAGA versus conservatives. Today on the Divided States of America show.
Welcome to the Divided States of America show, where your host, Marlon Gardenera, takes on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We'll sort through the best and worst of politics and culture, asking questions and looking for answers that our two-ring, two-party circus has failed to provide. And here is your host, Marlon Gardenera.
Welcome back, folks, and thank you for tuning in to the Divided States of America show. We are here weekdays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. All 65 previous episodes are also available. We appreciate you tuning in. Well, it's finally starting. It's finally happening. Let the separation begin. MAGA versus the GOP.
Marlon Gardenera.
I've been waiting for this for quite some time, as I have not understood how people sit back idly and allow things that are important to them to fade away or literally change to the degree they no longer understand or recognize who and what they are. It's no secret. I want to be a centrist. Sometimes I lean a little left, sometimes a little right. The thing that drew me to the middle after being a conservative for 20 plus years, a Reagan conservative, after being a conservative talk radio host, what drew me to the center was healthcare. I've had a number of health scares and experiences, one without insurance, and that's a different story for a different day, other than the fact that it cost me more than $1 million, which I could not afford. So I look for sound, reasonable ways to make sure Americans have their basic needs met, and it certainly wasn't an issue of not, as some people like to say, pulling myself up by my bootstraps and taking care of myself. That wasn't the case. Yet I still found myself, like many Americans, on the verge of bankruptcy based on my health. I don't believe it should happen, so it drew me to the center. But the current fight, finally, and I say finally, because I've got strong opinions about conservatives and even stronger opinions about MAGA. I never felt comfortable with the idea that that particular group was going to make America great again. I have even been known to say make America white again. Not as a whole, not everybody in it, but there were very specific things and actions that were done and said that gave me the impression they wanted the old America back, not the current one where people have more freedoms and more rights and equality is actually a thing. It isn't just a self-serving nation for a particular group. We've evolved. I can appreciate that. And again, I understand that not everybody who supports MAGA feels that way at all. I don't want to portray you that way. But John Daniel Davidson, the senior editor for The Federalist, has very strong opinions about conservatives versus MAGA. He said in an article written Thursday, "We need to stop calling ourselves conservatives." Okay, there it is. That's from their website. Blow that up for you. John Daniel Davidson, in his lengthy article, which referenced everything from trial by combat to Roman statesmen, Davidson repeatedly argues it's time for the American right to use the power of government to enforce its values, whatever he decides those values may be. Now, this is from Mediaite, this particular report. But he does note that Mr. Davidson says the conservative project has failed, and conservatives need to forge a new political identity that reflects our revolutionary moment. This takes a cue from the Claremont Institute senior fellow Michael Anton's Flight 93 essay. Davidson repeatedly claims Western civilization is dying and that the right must immediately rush to the cockpit and vanquish the left or all will be lost. Many on the right took issue with Davidson's argument and wished him and his ilk good riddance from the conservative movement. And let me tell you, there were quite a few people who wanted to wish them good riddance. Here are some of the comments that you'll see. Matt Lewis on Twitter, at Matt K. Lewis. I agree. Nationalist MAGA right-wingers should quit using our name. People have strong opinions, and you're starting to see that separation between traditional conservatives and MAGA, who they consider far right wingers or nationalists, or some will go so far as to say white nationalists. Again, I understand not everybody who identifies with MAGA qualifies for the more extreme definitions. They are in the group with you, but you do not qualify. I understand and respect that. But again, the opinions are strong. Since there's some confusion, this is Sean T. at RCP. He's proposing they stop calling themselves conservatives. I'm good with that. This is Sean T. at Sean T. RCP, who thinks MAGA, in fact, should stop using the name conservative. And the last one from Scott Howard. This piece goes on and on about how the ideas of conservatives have sought to conserve over the last 60 years are dead. And instead of advocating for rebuilding those ideas, he suggests we abandon them. Scott Howard at Conserva News on Twitter says, you can abandon your conservatism, I'll keep mine. Again, very strong opinions about conservatism versus MAGA. Now, taking a look at the article from John Daniel Davidson from The Federalist, he again answers the question, why? Well, because the conservative project has largely failed, and it's time for a new approach. Conservatives have long defined their politics in terms of what they wish to conserve or preserve: individual rights, family values, religious freedom, and so on. Conservatives, we are told, want to preserve the rich traditions and civilization's achievements of the past, pass them on to the next generation, and defend them from the left. After all, and I'm reading directly from the article, after all, what have conservatives succeeded in conserving? In just his lifetime, John Daniel Davidson's, they have lost much. Marriage as it's been understood for thousands of years, the First Amendment, any semblance of control of our borders, a fundamental distinction between men and women, and especially of late, the basic rule of law. He goes on to say, Western civilization is dying. The traditions and practices that conservatives champion are, at best, being preserved only in the ever-sinking private sphere. At worst, they are being trampled to dust. They certainly do not form the basis of our common culture or civic life, as they did for most of our nation's history. I have to stop there. Thank goodness. And the idea that it can be preserved in the private sphere is wonderful. It means that you have the ability to be any form of conservative you'd like to be, any traditions you think are important, any values you hold dear. You absolutely, in your private life, have the ability to carry those out to the nth degree. Largely, in America, you can think, feel, want anything you'd like. It's when that crosses over into impacting other people that it becomes an issue, whether it be via regulation or law. When you impact the lives of other people by virtue of what you think without regard for them, that's when it becomes a problem. But he is correct. In the private sphere, you can do and think whatever you want. I applaud people's ability to be who they want to be, particularly in the private sphere. And I don't mind if they're that way publicly. But it's very clear to me, and one of the reasons I don't have a problem walking away from being a conservative Republican, is that you really believe what you want should apply to other people. Now, every liberal who thinks the government is a great way to get things done and wants other people's tax dollars spent in particular ways, in ways that even people on the other side don't agree, has to understand there's some component of you wanting your will on other people too. Now, when we use democracy to do it, everybody feels a little better off. When we feel the altruistic love and importance for making sure people have health and education and some basics, we use it as a cover. But ultimately, people still do want what they want, and they don't mind using other people's money to do it. So I understand that the argument goes both ways. However, the idea that conservatism should form the common culture and civic life that it did for much of our nation's history has to take into account that for much of our nation's history, this was a racist nation. We were a sexist nation. Not to say that either of those things are gone, because we've made great strides. But much of our history has been tainted by how we treated people who didn't identify the same as you. I'll say that, identify the same as you. It's unfortunate that we cherish so much of our history, despite how bad parts of it were. There were things that were valued and good, things that don't hurt people to still have, But the idea that people have a different view, different perspective, different wants and wishes and needs, and the fact that others think that that should be completely ignored speaks to why there are less conservatives in America than there are Democrats. I don't want to say liberal because there are people who are centrist who, okay, I'm okay with healthcare. I don't want the government carrying it out. I don't think it's the best entity. But I think without the balance, healthcare would only be for people with enough money to afford it, and they would leave out lots of people out of concern that they couldn't contribute equally. Hey, that's business. That's capitalism. I understand. But in the richest nation in our country, I think the basic needs of people is something that shouldn't be something you hope for. And if you have limitations, unable to work, mentally unable to accomplish things, does that mean we shouldn't care for you because you no longer can make the money to do it? I don't know. There's some basic things that I think we leave out. And unfortunately, conservatives, or now MAGA, often represents things that I find reprehensible. Understood. There are things MAGA finds reprehensible about the far left. But for those of us in the middle, we know there's compromise. We know there's room for discussion. We know there are ways to make things work better, and we don't even try. Having said that, more from Daniel Davidson. To talk now of family values is to assume that there are enough Americans able and willing to marry and raise children together for something like family values. I didn't understand what he meant by enough willing. People can choose what they want. If that is their primary goal or purpose, they can do it. There's nothing keeping people from getting married, nothing keeping people from staying together. So when he says able to marry and raise children, I don't understand that. But again, to maintain those family values, he thinks they need to be able to marry and raise children together. And as a matter of public discourse. But much less in the halls of power, to talk of defending religious freedom is to misapprehend the real risk today of widespread irreligion, which will leave so few religious Americans in the coming generations that the government and large corporations will inevitably and easily persecute them. I'm not quite sure what they mean by persecution other than to say that your religion doesn't get to trump me. Your right for you is your right for you. Your right for you does not have to apply to me. I have faith. I am a believer. But I do not impose that on you. I do not expect that you do the same that I do. And I certainly don't want the government enforcing that. I'd like that separation to be maintained so that I have a right to live without it, or more importantly, without yours, if your faith and your belief is different from mine. But the idea that we would use our traditional values, which often means that we would be a Christian nation, if that's what the people of America want to be, so be it. If they would like to be Muslim or Jewish or another belief system, or would like to not believe at all, that is their prerogative. The idea that these people are so comfortable telling us that they need to use the government to enforce their values is incredibly uncomfortable. So where I draw the line and distinction between, for instance, MAGA and conservatives, I understand conservative values. I was one for 20 years. Some things don't make sense. Some policies don't make sense. But I always thought even with the average conservative, we could sit down, have a discussion, and find a way to come up with middle ground such that more people are covered. Not all or nothing for one side or the other. More people are covered by the things we in common or by consensus agree with. The MAGA movement, much like the Tea Party, had such strong feelings in some places that were so reprehensible to me, it was hard to understand. The racial component of the Tea Party, it was disgusting. It just was. The nationalist part of it, MAGA, sorry, I'm just not there. And again, we both have the right to not agree. But the idea that you think that you're going to impose that on all of us, we've already had Donald Trump hoisted on us. We've already had a movement that has no problem engaging racists. We have a president, former, who posted white power in a tweet, had to take it down, said he didn't know. You would think the president, understanding his role and place in our country, would understand that you probably don't want to put that up. But let's be honest, MAGA fans. There are people so hungry for power or so hungry to make sure that their values are imposed on others, their religion, their beliefs, the way they would like the world to be, void of LGBTQ. They would like to dictate whether or not other people can exist and what rights they have as people, as if people need permission from you to be themselves? It always blows my mind that there are actually people who think, I need permission to be black or have any right that you think you have. It's absurd. You will never stop anyone from getting there and those. And for the limitations you have been able to put, they will go away. It has been the evolution of our country that we started to be more fair, more equal, more open. And the idea that you don't want to be, no one is limiting your ability to be more of anything you want to be. Go down that road. But that is something in your private sphere. And you will be fought every time you try to make that our culture. It's not. It's yours. Maintain it, keep it, grow it, promote it. There will be people who follow. But please know that the single biggest identifier of MAGA is Donald Trump. His lack of integrity and character and continual lies define that movement, your beliefs, what's important to you. The values you think you have, you put aside to overlook clear lack of values from Donald Trump. Again, not political from right or left perspective, from the litmus test of I have children. And if you're trying to tell me I need to promote values, please tell me how you consistently or exist with Donald Trump as the leader of that MAGA movement. There are conservatives who are finally wanting to separate. There are conservatives who recognize there are things about MAGA that don't represent conservatism. I hope they have that discussion, respectfully and thoughtfully. I hope they divide and split and let people who want to be more extreme, let people who say they have values but then pick leaders who have none, and that goes for both parties, but MAGA in particular, as we look at so many of the unique characteristics about them, predominantly white, predominantly uneducated, various regions of the country, it almost looks like American history. But remember, not all of American history was good. Not to say those people are bad, and they can have whatever beliefs they want. But I hope they understand that there is a line and a limit. Donald Trump met that line and limit when he wasn't elected. People realize that enough is enough of some things. And the fact that MAGA still exists, so be it. But there's not a lot to be proud of if you're talking about values. You put aside your values for your leadership. If you don't agree, by all means, chime in. You can comment on Facebook. I'll be posting on this subject, and when we do, we tend to get 750, 1,000, a couple thousand comments. I'm interested in knowing whether you're MAGA or conservative, or if you think there's still room to be both, or if more conservatives would like MAGA to separate, take on their own identity, and in fact stop using the idea of conservatism. Because here's some realities that you can't forget. You knew attacking Gold Star families, and this is Trump, you knew it was wrong. You knew it had nothing to do with your respect and honor for veterans or their families, particularly when veterans are lost in the line of duty. You knew that. You don't need me to explain that. You do need somebody to tell you that when values were truly part of the equation, that was one that for the most part you hear a lot of people saying veterans are critically important, stand up for the national anthem, but when one is lost and one is gone and his parents don't agree with you, you didn't mind a Gold Star family being attacked. You didn't mind a dead senator who was a POW who fought for our country being attacked. Where are your values, or where were they then? We just had an episode here on the Divided States of America show where we talked about backing the blue. Blue Lives Matter, as it being an evolution from all lives matter, trying to minimize the sound of Black Lives Matter. It turned to all lives, then it turned to blue lives, except on January 6th where MAGA was clear. They wanted the election to stop, the certification to stop, and they didn't care about the blue when they tried to stop it. They had no concern for the blue. Blue lives didn't matter that day. It's kind of like the values you have to put aside for Gold Star families and John McCain. You knew COVID wouldn't be gone by Easter of 2020 when Trump said it. You certainly hold Biden accountable for saying inflation would go away. But a pass on Easter 2020, COVID, that means 1 million lives would not have been lost from COVID. Where are your values when we talk integrity? You knew that, in fact, there weren't good people on both sides of Charlottesville. If you were on the side of white nationalists, if you were worried about being replaced, you're not being replaced. You are, in addition to, you are one of many, and the many speak too. You're not being replaced. No one wants to be you. No one wants to share your values. No one wants to share your bigotry and hate. We're not replacing you. We're speaking up for ourselves and the values that our founding fathers wrote in the Constitution, although they didn't live up to them either. Most importantly, you knew the election wasn't stolen. But it's easy to identify MAGA supporters as people who think the lie is true. 60 courts. Let me guess, the courts are bad. The judges are bad. Even the Trump-appointed judges who said there was no mass voter fraud. We don't need to change all of the laws, not unless you want to disproportionately impact people who don't support you. I have a problem with people saying they're all about values and then not having any. And don't get me wrong, I'm like the average person. I have values and I fall short on some. But I'm not trying to start a political party based on it. I'm not trying to start a party and say that I'm a conservative and conservatives adhering to family values if I don't have any myself. But a lot of MAGA people are. I have friends who are MAGA, which doesn't change how I feel about the people on the extreme. I don't make them account for their beliefs because they are theirs. The only time or reason I think I would need to hold them accountable is if they tried to impose theirs on me. And since we're friends, we don't. We have so many components to our lives that the political or our motivations on how we'd like things to be aren't things that we really hoist on each other. We may do it via our vote, but I have the ability to vote too. So it's not as if it's a one-to-one relationship that they're trying to tell me that I need to take on their values. They're just saying that's what they believe and they vote that way. But be clear, we're not in a cold civil war. There are just MAGA people whining and crying because the world is changing, and it's not going to stop because they want it to be white, predominantly male, Christian, without LGBTQ, without integrity, with leaders who lie endlessly. If that's what they want, so be it. Just understand that's not going on to us. And finally, we're starting to see conservatives who are going to say it's not going to continue to define them either. Conservatives, speak up. Stand up. Does MAGA really represent you? That's it for today. I'm grateful, again, that you took this opportunity to tune into the Divided States of America show. We are here live weekdays at noon, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. 65 previous episodes on a list of subjects. I know I came across as pretty far left today. I want to be in the middle. But if it's MAGA on the other side, I don't mind distancing myself as far as I can. Thanks again for tuning into the Divided States of America show. Conservatives, let us know what you think.
Thanks for watching the Divided States of America show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel and share this video with your family and friends.